This incident took place approximately 2 years ago, when I was living alone in an apartment. The apartment complex was quite large, and I had a couple of friends who also resided there. Interestingly, I met some of these friends after moving into the complex. Adjacent to the apartment complex, there was a park that featured a beautiful and lengthy trail. This trail connected to a path, extending beyond the immediate vicinity, passing through a densely wooded area. Many residents of our complex would walk their dogs on this trail, while others would relax at the picnic tables and grassy area in front of the park. Personally, I had visited the park on numerous occasions, often strolling along the trail either alone or with my friends. I found it much more engaging than using the treadmill in the apartment gym. One day, a friend from the floor below me, Anna, shared a rather chilling experience with me. She recounted how the previous night, while walking on the trail after sunset, she began hearing footsteps behind her. This was unusual, since she hadn't noticed anyone walking behind her before. As she neared the edge of the woods, the sound of the footsteps intensified, leading her to increase her pace. To her surprise, the footsteps quickened as well. When she glanced back, she caught sight of a man disappearing into the woods. His incident deeply unsettled her, and she hastened the rest of her journey out of the woods and back onto the trail, which fortunately wasn't far away. I was relieved to hear that she reached safety. But we both found it odd that the man ran into the woods. Curiously, the very next night, I found myself walking alone on the trail after dark, oblivious to Anna's story. It was a pleasant evening, and I had returned from work slightly earlier. Eager to take a walk, I set off on the trail, but the sun was on the verge of setting, causing me to forget about Anna's experience. I traversed the woods without encountering anyone throughout the entire duration of my walk. Typically, by sunset, the park and trail would be deserted. On my way back, the surroundings had grown almost entirely dark. However, around 10 minutes away from the apartment building, I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. It was then that Anna's encounter came rushing back, sending a shiver down my spine. I turned to look, but the darkness obscured my vision. I thought I saw someone walking at a distance, possibly a man. Reacting to this, I increased my pace. After a short while, the sounds of footsteps ceased, but mere minutes later, they resumed. This time, the footsteps weren't on the path, but within the woods, audibly approaching me through the thick trees. I continued walking at a brisk pace, uncertain about what to do. I wasn't a fast runner, nor did I have any pepper spray or similar protective items with me. The man emerged from the woods and rejoined the path. Now approximately 30 feet behind me, he was looking down and not directly at me. Knowing that I was nearing the end of the woods, but still about 3 minutes away, I made the decision to start jogging. To my surprise, the man instantly broke into a jog as well. While jogging, I retrieved my phone from my pocket, desperately attempting to make a call as I continued running, which proved to be quite challenging. Nonetheless, I managed to dial 911 and place the phone on speaker, ensuring that the man could hear me. I loudly stated my need for police assistance at the park, providing them with the address. Meanwhile, the man continued jogging behind me, audible but hidden within the woods once more. Unable to see him, I ran faster and tried to ignore the sounds of his footsteps. Eventually, I ceased hearing his presence altogether, as though he had changed direction and moved away. At that point, I had safely exited the wooded section of the trail approximately a minute later. Returning to my apartment, I immediately contacted the police and recounted the entire ordeal. They promptly arrived at the park, conducting a search of the immediate area, including the woods. Unfortunately, by that time, the man must have fled, as they were unable to locate him. I felt foolish for momentarily forgetting Anna's story, but I shared it with the police during our conversation. Subsequently, a notice was sent to all residents, warning about a potential stalker in the park and advising against nighttime walks. Fortunately, I never encountered the man again after that incident. I can only hope he didn't continue his troubling behavior elsewhere. I remain unsure about his intentions, but witnessing him chasing after me through the woods was truly terrifying. This incident occurred many years ago during my childhood, and I have vague recollections of my exact age. I estimate that I was around 8 years old at that time. During that period, I had a strong affinity for a nearby park located just a short walk away from our house, where my parents, younger brother, and I resided. The park, which took approximately 2 minutes to reach on foot, was frequented by a considerable number of people due to our moderately populated neighborhood. However, there were moments when I could enjoy the swings without much competition, either by myself or accompanied by my brother. The park featured typical amenities such as swings, monkey bars, slides, and various other play equipment. Additionally, it had a small field, a trail encircling the area, and a parking lot to streets bordered the park. On a particular Saturday morning, I made my way to the park unaccompanied. Although it wasn't explicitly permitted for me to go alone, I had done so a few times before without incident. Consequently, my parents had become somewhat lenient with the rules when I arrived at the park on that day. There was nobody else present. My brother had also opted not to join me, but I can't recall the exact reason. He was likely either still asleep or engrossed in watching TV. As a child, I thoroughly enjoyed spending time outdoors and had boundless energy. Engaged in play activities on the park's equipment, including a zipline-like apparatus whose specific name eludes me. Afterward, I gravitated towards the swings, spending a considerable amount of time there. By that point, approximately 30 minutes had elapsed since my arrival, and no one else had come to the park during that duration. The swings faced the road, occasionally granting me a glimpse of passing cars. As I was about to conclude my swinging session and head home, I noticed a silver car slowly approaching. Its leisurely pace gave the impression that it might stop at the park, but instead, it continued driving and eventually turned onto the street, bordering the park, disappearing from my view in the distance. As a child, I had a slightly suspicious nature regarding slow-moving cars. Roughly a minute passed, and I began decelerating the swing until it came to a halt. While seated there, I noticed a man walking down the sidewalk in front of the park. He had relatively long hair and seemed uncertain about his destination, slowly traversing the children's play area. Notably, he did not have a child accompanying him, which struck me as peculiar. Considering the circumstances, I decided it was best to return home. I dismounted from the swing and proceeded in the opposite direction of the man, purposefully avoiding eye contact. Safely navigating through a neighbour's front yard, I rejoined the sidewalk, which was a mere 2-minute walk from our house. While walking, with my house already visible in the distance, I heard a car approaching from behind. Glancing backward, I recognized the same silver car from earlier, continuing its leisurely pace. I maintained my stride, and eventually, the car caught up to me. To my surprise, the man with long hair from the park was behind the wheel. The car's window was rolled down, and he curiously glanced in my direction, feeling uneasy. I averted my gaze and realized I was only around 100 feet away from the safety of my house. Taking a detour through another neighbor's front yard, I successfully evaded the car's proximity. I observed it gradually passing by my house, while I hastened through the rest of the yard. Finally, I arrived home, swiftly entering through the front door. At that point, the silver car was a significant distance away, but still in motion, maintaining its sluggish speed. Once inside, I promptly forgot about the incident, assuming it had come to an end. However, several hours later, when I ventured back into the front yard, I spotted the silver car once again, gradually progressing down the street. Filled with trepidation, I hurriedly returned indoors, watching from the window as the car continued its slow journey, illuminated by the flashing lights of police cars. The sight of the police lights drew my parents' attention, and they engaged in a discussion about the unfolding situation, while I remained fixated on the television. Peering over, I too glimpsed the commotion outside the window. It turned out that the police had stopped the same silver car. Subsequently, everyone departed after a few minutes, and I shared the details of my encounter with the car to my parents. They decided to report the incident to the police, which later revealed that the suspicious vehicle had been reported by another neighbor. Apparently, the car had been circling the block late at night, driving remarkably slowly. I am grateful that the police intervened. Sometimes, I ponder whether the man had sinister intentions, such as attempting to break into our house. Occasionally, my boyfriend and I enjoy visiting a park in our town. During these visits, we typically take a walk along the trail and spend time playing on the playground. On one particular night, we decided to go to the park, but upon arrival, we realized that it was too cold for us to enjoy the playground or walk the trail. Consequently, we opted to sit in the parking lot and engage in conversation. As we sat there, having a normal discussion about everyday matters, a red car slowly entered the parking lot. At that moment, we were the only ones present since the park tends to be quiet in the evening. The driver of the red car appeared to be a woman, and she pulled up in front of us. Initially, we were perplexed, unsure of her identity or the reason for her actions. We entertained the possibility that it might be someone we knew playing a prank on us. However, as we observed her more closely, we realized she was a complete stranger. She remained seated in her car, blocking our vehicle with hers, and continuously staring at us without shifting her gaze even once. Her unsettling appearance and demeanor raised red flags. She maintained her unwavering, creepy stare, despite us having no connection or knowledge of her. Eventually, she reversed her car while still fixated on us and backed up a short distance. She then brought her car to a stop, maintaining her gaze. At this point, confusion and fear began to set in. The woman proceeded to move her car once more, this time parking it right next to ours. After parking, she continued staring at us for a little while longer, before finally shifting her attention away from us. It seemed she was now engrossed in her phone, or some other activity. Although my boyfriend contemplated rolling down the window to address the situation, I had an uneasy feeling and urged him to leave quickly. We drove away, and as we did so, we noticed the woman reversing her car. It seemed as though she might try to follow us. Fortunately, we had a head start and rapidly sped away, ultimately evading her pursuit. Afterward, we discussed the experience, and a chill ran down my spine. We couldn't identify the woman or comprehend her intentions. Nonetheless, I can confidently say it was one of the creepiest encounters I've ever had. For the purpose of this story, let's say my name is Bella. The events I'm about to share took place approximately a year or two ago. At the time, I was around 18 years old and had a great fondness for going to the park. Both the town I lived in and the park I frequented were quite small in size. My preferred spots at the park were the picnic area and the swings. One summer day, I decided to visit the park to enjoy some fresh air. I made my way to the swings, which were adjacent to a small parking lot. Interestingly, I found myself to be the sole person in the entire park. After spending about 30 minutes there, a car pulled into the parking lot. It was a white diesel truck. I had no knowledge of who was inside, but I anticipated someone getting out. However, no one emerged from the truck initially. I didn't think much of it. Several minutes passed, and still, no one exited the truck. For some reason, I started feeling a bit uneasy. Due to this unsettling feeling, I decided to relocate to another area of the park. Sometime later, I noticed that the truck was still there, with no one coming out of it. This heightened my unease, prompting me to make the decision to go home. As I walked back home, I occasionally looked behind me to see if the vehicle was still present, and to my surprise, it was indeed still there. Upon reaching home, I recounted the entire incident to my mom. She was not amused by what I had shared. In fact, she suggested that we both walk to the park to see if the car was still there. When we arrived, the car had vanished. The strange thing is that a similar occurrence happened again, although it involved a different vehicle. On this occasion, a car pulled up and simply remained parked while I was the only person present at the park. It felt highly suspicious. Since then, we have moved to a different location, so I no longer experience such situations. To this day, I remain unaware of who those individuals were or what their intentions might have been.